Looks like we're good to go.
Okay, great.
Okay, so let me just double check on YouTube, make sure because this is my first live stream ever. So, hello everybody, welcome to the first live stream of the Bitcoin Nova. I'm here with Larry Lepard. Let me just double check. Yes, I can see my screen. Okay, perfect. Um, Let me just turn off my YouTube page here. Okay, so I don't get any echo. Oops, I have it on my phone. Okay, yes, guys, this is live. So I'm just trying to get you to all this. Now we're all set to go. So you are a legendary investor. I am
Hardly.
so honored to have you on the show. I have your book here behind me on the
I saw
shelf.
that.
You can
Thank you
see
very
it
much.
right over here. Yes.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
you are the author of The Big Print. You are the managing partner at Equity Management Associates,
Yeah,
and you're a vocal advocate of Bitcoin. So, thank you again for joining me. This is amazing to get to talk to you. I'm very honored. And I read your book. I also listened to the audiobook version. It was incredible.
yeah. Walter
Um,
did a good job. Yeah.
yeah, you really did. I love how I heard you speak in another podcast about how you wanted to ignite sort of this anger a little bit. You know, you wanted people to see the truth. You wanted to
Right.
explain it for people who don't understand. So I really love that about the book.
Thank you. Yeah, it's yeah. The mission is to try and get the more Americans and people worldwide, really. But I start from the American point of view. More people to understand what's been done to them, and then get them, make them aware of it, and then hopefully they'll get angry about it, and then hopefully they'll take action to solve it. We all
Yes.
know what that is. So yeah, that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, and I love that you wrote the book too because you were thinking, people have all these thoughts about what's going on in the finance world and what governments are doing with money printing and inflation. And, you have these ideas, but by writing the book, you are putting your words into history. Like you're actually etching that into a part of history.
I hope
History. So,
so. I mean, that's yeah. I thought about that for sure. I mean, it's yeah, it's a story that needs to be told, and it wasn't being told. I mean, there are a lot of other great books that have done a very good job, but I kind of came at it from a different perspective, trying to tell more of my personal story, and therefore maybe get people more involved in it. People don't always read textbooks or other books on Bitcoin,
your
and you
first.
notice I didn't put Bitcoin on the cover. I just made the cover orange
Hmm.
because
I
some
love
people
it.
are kind of anti-Bitcoin. They don't really understand it. They lump it in with crypto. I've encountered a lot of that, and I try and debunk all of that. So,
Yeah, that's really great. And I love that because people might see a Bitcoin cover and they think, I don't understand it. I'm not going to read it just already because I just don't
right.
agree with it or something. But when you show that the US dollar is on the cover and the name of your book, the big print, it just draws people in. And
That's
I
it. Yeah,
love
hang on one
how,
second. Let my
yeah,
dog
sure,
out.
no problem.
It always happens, Stacy. Right after I start a recording or a live broadcast, my dog
Yeah,
decides she has to go outside right
that's
then.
so cute. What kind of dog do you have?
It's a West Highland Terrier.
Oh,
It's
cute.
hard to ignore her. She's very vocal when she has something she wants. So, anyway,
That's
yeah,
funny.
I mean, I tried to come at it. I mean, so I mean, the average American, the average citizen, they're being gaslit by the government, right?
Mhm.
Greedy corporations. We didn't do it. It's not our fault. Blah blah blah. And those are all just lies. And so, and I think people sense, a lot of people I know sense something's wrong. I mean, how can you not when you go to the supermarket and you see the food inflation? And so, I think that too few people understand what's causing it, and
Mhm.
that's why I wrote the book. To try to explain in terms that they can understand that yeah, it is hard these days, and it's wrong and it's broken and it's systematic, and we've got to fix it. And so
Yeah.
the first part of the book's kind of depressing, about how broken it all is, and it's designed to get people active and mad about it. The second part of the book is, hey, it's really optimistic that there's this great solution emerging, and technology is going to carry us to a much better world where sound money is going to be the base layer, and we're going to be, things are going to be good. And that's what we have to look forward to. But we need to make the transition from here to there, and it's going to take a few years. It's not going to just happen overnight. So,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
does it does have this you do have hope when you realize there's a solution. A lot of
absolutely.
people,
Bitcoin
yeah.
changes you in that respect. I mean, you just get so much more positive and optimistic, and you start thinking long term and taking care of, physically, eating better, working out. I mean, everything about it. When you think there's a bright future ahead, you want to you want to stretch out, your life and enjoy things. So,
Yeah.
and sadly, when it looks like there's no hope, of course, the opposite's true. And even in the
Hmm.
beginning of the book, I show those charts on the deaths of despair. I mean, sadly, a lot of citizens have been very badly damaged by the economic system, and that's not good for them. That's not good for their health. So,
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's true. It's like people don't, they're just in this, stuck in this infinite loop of working too hard and struggling to get by. And they don't, like, I feel like people just, they're not looking forward to their future. They're not trying to take care of their bodies, and they don't have time to exercise and do things that are important to them. And I just feel like the beginning part of the book where you said it was depressing, it's very eye opening though, because you speak about your father and your grandfather.
sorry,
No, it's okay.
all kinds of stuff going
Yeah.
on. Yeah,
And it
keep going.
was
Sorry.
it really hit me too, hearing that, because it's a story that's been told over and over again throughout families and throughout generations, where your grandfather had a furniture company, handcrafted furniture.
Handicraft, yeah.
Yeah, and it was crazy because they build up this confidence in business owners and people that own companies, and the federal government, and the interest rate policies and all of that. Once they lower the interest rates and make you feel like the economy is doing great, you are optimistic, and you think, I need to grow this business. I'm so busy. I have to take out these loans. And you try to grow the business, and then it turns around and they raise the interest rates so
They
hard,
rug
and they
pull you. Yeah.
yeah, they rug pull you. Yes, for
Yeah.
years it's been happening.
Well, it happens over and over again. It happened in dot coms, and really it happened in 2008. I mean, everyone alive today, no doubt, had parents who went through the 2008 crisis, and a lot of people got really hurt. I mean, my sister lost her house. It's just, it's the Federal Reserve has been a very destructive force in
Mhm.
American history, and that's not the story they would tell you, of course. I mean, Jay Powell in his last press conference talked about how everything they do is in the interest of the American people. And that's just horseshit.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
that's
And it makes you, that's why when you mention the word gaslighting, like, a lot of people even today don't really understand the word gaslighting. I always hear people say, what does
yeah,
that really actually mean? But that is a perfect example of what our government does,
right,
because they make you think that, this is just the way it is. Everything's fine. You're wrong about, they make you believe that you're crazy because you're thinking that these things are
exactly.
not right. And they're turning around and they're assuring you that everything is fine. They can't have a forward outlook on what's happening with the economy because they're blinded by greed. So they
It's
just do what they
all,
have to do for
yeah,
themselves.
it's all just a big psyop. I mean,
Mhm.
and the people in power, the people in control, they've been lying to us for years and years and decades, and not just about the money, about other things too. I mean, they murdered the president, and the CIA murdered the president, and what they very conveniently kind of drew the lines through the media and other things to say that anybody who believed in that was a crazy wingnut conspiracy theorist, when in
Mhm.
fact all of the objective evidence just overwhelmingly points to that's what happened.
Right.
And so they try and make you think you're crazy when you point
Mhm.
out the truth. And this goes on over and over again. I mean, when I was young, the Vietnam War got going, and it was all, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, when they claimed that one of our boats was attacked in the Gulf of Tonkin, which it wasn't. They made it up in order to escalate the war. So, there are hundreds of examples of this. And the beautiful thing, though, Stacy, that I point to in the book, and the optimistic piece of the book, is that the internet technology is going to save us, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the internet. I mean, heck, 10 years ago, you and I couldn't have even had this conversation real time, different parts of the country, broadcasting out to hundreds of people, right? That
Right.
just couldn't have even occurred, and now it is. And so, the New York Times and the mainstream media don't control the narrative anymore.
Mhm.
Tucker Carlson is a participant. Joe Rogan is a participant. You're a participant. Many other
Mhm.
people are participants, and so the internet has allowed people to realize how badly they've been gaslit, because people who are truth tellers are coming out and telling the truth.
Mhm.
And so, I'm just kind of, I'm the most recent monetary truth teller, because I've seen this thing for, the benefit I brought in writing the book, I think. And the reason I kind of, I felt like I was tapped on the shoulder and said, hey, you ought to write this. And the reason I did it is because I just thought, I've lived through this for a long time. I'm 67 years old. I saw how all this went down, and I see a lot of young people in Bitcoin and sound money not really understanding the whole history of how we got to where we are. So I
Hmm.
thought I would kind of try and explain that and just lay it out very clearly. Look, this has been a long campaign on the part of the elite and the centralized systems, including the government and the top people at the top, to screw the common person. Period.
Yeah.
And they've
Yeah.
done a good job of it because look at the top 1% now owns 92% of the wealth.
Yeah.
And we've got oligarchs running the country. So it's just not right.
Yeah.
And we, but if we live in a representative democracy, which you do, arguably quite a broken one, but nevertheless, enough voices, enough protest, enough work on our part, I still am optimistic and believe that we can and will overcome the system that they've got in place
Yeah.
because
Well,
people aren't stupid.
yes, yes. And of course, they're not stupid because of what you said, because of technology, the way it's transforming
Exactly.
the landscape now and allowing this truth to be told. And, people that they used to be able to control narratives and hide, ideas that they called conspiracy theories. And instead, they were actually just conspiracies. But it's like you think about how government just moves so slow, but they used to be in such control for such a long time. But with the advances in technology, they move too slow and technology moves too fast, and
That's
they
right.
can't outrun it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and
Mhm.
they want it. They'd love to kill Bitcoin, but they can't.
Right.
They'd love to shut down all these voices, but they can't. I mean,
Mhm.
they're trying to attack free speech, but guess what? It's going to just keep coming back to get them, and so they're losing, which is a really beautiful thing in my opinion. I mean, it's
Right.
really fun to watch these people lose and scramble, and they're getting more and more desperate, and we're just going to bury them in the dustbin of history.
I love it. And I love that I think of you as like you're a rebel in that way too, because you like we have this community on X that's called the Paranoid Bitcoin Anarchists, but it's I feel like it's like the people that think of us as paranoid and anarchists, but I think that we think of it because regular people look at people that understand Bitcoin and they think you are just paranoid. But it's like, no, I actually am just seeing the truth.
That's
And
exactly right. Yeah,
right. And I feel like you have that fire in you. You have that anger about what happened in the past and living through financial I mean, you worked in finance for all these years. You've seen what goes on. So it's like for you to come out and write this book and tell your story and actually explain it in a way that people that are told what to believe, for them to understand the truth, it's very important for people to just
thank you.
open their
Well,
eyes.
that's really why I did it. I mean, I saw, I recall early last year, 2024, the election cycle. I recall seeing some conversation and debate or something on one of the mainstream media programs, and you had blue team yelling at red team and red team yelling. I mean, they were arguing about all kinds of stuff that, in my opinion, was just it's not relevant. It was stupid stuff, and
Mhm.
nobody was talking about the really underlying problem that's caused everybody to be so angry. I mean, I think you have to admit that there are a lot of people who are hurting in this society today economically, and that hurt is leading to a lot of political anger on both sides. And so, and to me, it's not really the politics that are causing all this; it's the underlying money that's causing all this. I mean, if people are living well and getting better, and they see their lifestyle improving over time, they tend to be pretty happy, and
Mhm.
not really. They don't want to go out and get into political arguments. But if things are getting worse, they start pointing fingers and looking for people to blame, and that's why it's so nasty out there right now. And so, I just felt like somebody's got to explain to everybody that this political stuff is really driven by the underlying economic stuff that's
Mhm.
making life harder. And that's not some mystery. That's not, as
Mhm.
one side says, that's not greedy corporations. That's the Federal Reserve and the money printing. And,
Mhm.
the cantillionaires and the banks and the way they've set the whole system up so that, if you're at the top, hey, you like inflation. It works great for you. You buy things, you lever them up, they go up in value, your cost of capital is cheap, et cetera. You get ahead in the world. If you're you and me or anybody else, you want to borrow money, well, you got to pay the credit card company 25%, which is just,
Mhm.
that would have been usury in the old days. Of course, all the usury laws have been gutted. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very, very, very unfair system. And if you go back to the Constitution, the notion of the Constitution of the United States, which made it such a wonderful country and took us to the top of the world post World War II, it was kind of equal justice under law and fairness. Now, we didn't always live up to it. There are a lot of things the country did wrong, the treatment of the Indians, the slaves. I mean, all this stuff. We have a lot of black marks in our history, but we're evolving in the correct direction. And but this monetary thing, we never really solved this. This evolved in the wrong direction. and it's
Yes.
gotten much worse. And
It's
that's
like they
why.
escaped. Like people always talk about how they escaped so they could start a new country and have different rules and not be oppressed and be free. And instead, they
Right.
just built the same system that they escaped from in the first place.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the same because we don't have royalty, although
Mm,
effectively oligarchs have become like royalty, but
yeah,
it was a better system. There was, there was rule of law.
for
I
a
mean,
while. Yeah.
we in theory, I mean, look, I think the founding documents, the Constitution, are fabulous things. I mean, it's
Yes.
just kind of amazing what they did with this country, and yet, like so many things, and this is the fourth turning cycle, like so many things, eventually, a system gets older, corrupt, broken, and as I say in the book, you get to the point where you have quote unquote diseconomies of scale. In the beginning, economy of scale, which is making things big so that they're more efficient, that actually made sense. I mean, Henry Ford kind of kicked that off with the assembly line, right? It was a lot better than putting together cars one car at a time by hand, and it made cars cheaper, and everybody got a car. But eventually, systems get so big that they're unwieldy, and the people at the top don't manage them correctly, and then you have an enormous country that's a system, like Germany, and some
Mhm.
idiot madman gets control of it and decides he wants to kill all the Jews, and so that's a diseconomy of scale, and I think we reached peak diseconomy, peak scale, and big organizations right at the end, right at World War II, because I mean we killed 40 plus million people, maybe 50 or 60 in that war, and that was the last fourth turning. And then since that time, things got better. We had our first turning. We had a lot of economic growth, but the flaws in the monetary system have become really apparent since World War II, and more particularly even since '71. I mean, another chart in the book that it's one of my favorite charts that I refer to a lot is the one where it just shows inflation over a very long period of time, and how in 1971 it just kind of inflects and goes straight up.
Yeah.
And Nixon taking us off the gold standard was a very, very bad thing.
Yeah.
But and
Um,
that started where we are, the path that got us to where we are today.
exactly. Yes.
Uh,
And that's why I love when you mentioned before that it evolved. It turned into this thing. It wasn't
right.
starting off this
Started
way.
off a lot better. Yeah.
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 And when can you explain the fourth turning to people that don't understand?
Sure. Yeah. And I highly recommend everybody who's read my book or is interested in this subject to read this book. It's a book, it's written quite some time ago now. It was written by Howe and Strauss. They're two social scientists.
Hmm.
The model is pretty simple. It basically studies history of a lot of societies. And what it shows is that you have kind of these 80-year cycles, and each 80-year cycle is broken up into four 20-year cycles. And what it posits, the big picture of what it posits is that every 80 years the societal rules get kind of old and broken, and then you go through a crisis period, and those rules get fixed, and a new birth occurs, and you're kind of in a first turning, and the society grows and moves forward. And so we're in what I consider to be a fourth turning that started in 2008 with the
Hmm.
great financial crisis. And the one prior to this, about 80 years prior to that, was World War II and
Hmm.
the Great Depression. The one prior to that was the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War,
Hmm.
and that was about 80 years prior to World War II. And then the one prior to that was the U.S. Revolution in 76 to 79. And think about what each of those events had in common. I mean, America, the world, and these happened in other countries too, but let's stick to America. America and the world was a certain way before the American Revolution. We were colonies of Britain, and they could tell us what to do. And we had a revolution, and things were different. We're now the new America with a constitution. Okay, great. Well,
Hmm.
America, and that went along for quite some time, and then eventually the issue of slavery became a defining issue, and states' rights and federal rights and so forth, and that led to the Civil War. And so America was a certain way before the Civil War, and then it was different after the Civil War.
Hmm.
And then it recovered, and we grew, and we did pretty well, and we had the Industrial Revolution, and things got really good in terms of we had a lot of deflation, and lifestyles, living standards went up enormously. I mean, we went from living in outhouses to having plumbing and electricity and cars and all that stuff, in the early 1900s, and that all led up to the culmination of the crisis, which was the crisis of fascism, and the diseconomies of scale in World War II. And
Hmm.
so we had to go out and fight and die to prove that democracy was better than fascism, and that was an existential moment, but we solved it. And we're in one of those now, in my opinion, and the issue is this monetary issue. And what happened is, the money changers all figured out how to game the system in their favor, and they've done it. they've done it since, since 1946, and they've particularly done it since 1971. And now they've done it to such a degree that it's setting up to implode, that it just, you
Mhm.
can't continue. I mean, the book shows, I mean, in the chapter that was inspired by Lynn Alden's meme, nothing stops this train.
Mhm.
The debt is just getting so out of control, and the deficits are so out of control. And as Hayek says, there's only one way of resolving these kind of a credit bubble, and that's either through stop printing or a complete collapse.
Right.
And we may get a little bit of both, but I mean, we were
Yeah.
kind of at that crisis stage. I mean, it's funny, I titled the book The Big Print.
That's what I was
And
gonna get to next. Yeah.
yeah, well, so we've really had two big prints, right? We had
Yes.
one in 2008, when Bernanke took the balance sheet from, 8 or 900 billion up to, I think it peaked around 4 trillion. But
Mhm.
over a course of 3 or 4 years, actually more than that. And then we had another big print with COVID, and of course that one was bigger and happened faster.
Mhm.
They printed 5 to 7 trillion. Took the balance sheet from, it had been reduced down to about 3. They took it up to 9. Of course, now it's been reduced down to about 7. But
This is
and
the
my
Fed
view is,
balance sheet.
what's that?
The
I'm
Fed
sorry.
balance sheet.
Fed balance sheet, yeah, which is a proxy for the money supply, and they're
Mhm.
very tightly correlated. They're not perfectly correlated because there's also fractional reserve lending. But the point is that the underlying problem that Lynn has pointed out with her meme of nothing stops this train and that's going on is that you just can't grow GDP at a rate faster than, or I'm sorry, grow debt at a rate faster than you're growing GDP
Mhm.
without that gap eventually causing a problem, which either means the debt has to collapse and be declared worthless, or you have to inflate GDP massively to get it back into balance. And a lot of people in other pods and others have asked me, and they say, well, okay, yeah, great, Larry, but you've been saying this for a while, and why now? And I don't know that it's now, by the way, this next big print. I mean, it could be in 6 months, but I'm pretty sure, going out, it could be in 5 years. I'm pretty sure it's probably within a year or two.
Well, the
But,
thing is,
you know,
like how you said, like that meme about that, and it's also reminds me of the meme from The Big Short, where Steve Carell's character says it's a bubble, so it's like we
oh,
have this
yeah,
credit bubble, and it's about to burst, and I feel like even though we haven't had a actual big print, do you feel like in the last 4 years, I heard a stat that since COVID, there's been another $14 trillion added to the national debt. 12 or
yeah,
14 trillion. So
right,
even though we technically haven't had this obvious big print, it's like literally growing every year,
correct.
so it's happening already, but something's going to literally break. It's going to be that bubble that's going to burst. And it's like the fact that it's looming so hard and the fact that you're
I think
trying to
you're
write
right on.
this.
You're right on target. I mean, you're right on target because what we've seen in the past is these things happen in nonlinear fashion. In '08, it created a lot of debt, and debt to GDP got to be very, very high, and the leverage ratios got to be very, very high, and then something broke. And then, of course, they had the choice of either let all the debt reset to a lower level and have a very significant economic downturn, which they chose not to do,
Mhm,
prosecute the people who'd taken on the debt and who'd been criminals in the way they'd handled the financial system,
mhm.
or print to bail them out and make them all whole, let them get paid out at par, and got $20 billion of bonuses, which is enormously unfair. While everyone else who'd been sucked into the bubble, like my grandfather was in 1929, they all lost their houses, right? Because they bought houses that were too expensive, used too much leverage, and
Yeah.
the downturn they got wiped. Many of them got wiped out. And I know a lot of people were really damaged by that bubble. So
Yeah,
yes, you're
because
right. I mean, it's coming.
they bail out the people that were irresponsible in the first place in order to not cause a systematic
Correct,
effect throughout the global markets, so they
correct,
think that we don't have another choice. We can't just let people fail because everything is so interconnected with like
correct,
every company being involved with every other company, and it could cause a global catastrophe. So they think, well, we have to do this, but in the
correct.
meantime you're hurting everyday Americans, which the majority, I think, of Americans are middle class. Like you have
Yep,
a small percentage at the top, a small percentage at the bottom, but a huge chunk of it is middle class. And every single day they're working harder. So when this print happens, anytime these big prints have happened, anytime they continue printing, it's like our savings is depleted. And how much, you think you have savings, but it's lost
you
40% of its
don't.
purchasing power.
Yeah, you lost 40% of your purchasing power in the COVID thing. I mean, you're exactly right. In order to save the system, and then by definition, the people who are at the top of the system, They print money that makes all the rest of us suffer. So everyone thinks, they've said, and I've heard people say, Bernanke's a genius. He saved the system. But they don't think about the other costs. And the other cost is, yes, he saved the system, but we pay higher prices for everything in order
Mhm.
to have provided that saving. And the people who benefited from that, are the people at the top,
Yeah. And
massively. And that's why the wealth inequality has gotten so large.
And that's why it's good that the second half of the book, when you talk about this optimism, when you talk about there actually being a solution, instead of people
Oh
thinking,
yeah,
well, this is the way the world is, I guess we just have to like play by these people's rules. There isn't, that's not the way it is. That's not the way it's turning
exactly.
out to be.
Exactly, and that's I think, the second half of the book is the fun part of the book because the first half of the book kind of details, this stuff, and you could read it and you could get depressed. But I think, more likely what a lot of people are likely to do is, I mean, the book is written as problem and solution, right? And so, and the first half, I had to write the first half because if you don't understand the problem, you can't think about the solution.
Right.
And the first half is designed to wake people up to the problem so that they then come to the correct conclusion about the solution. And
Right.
yes, the solution is extremely optimistic. I mean, it's going to get so much better. We're going to solve it. In fact, I did a podcast yesterday with a gentleman, really fun guy, who was Argentinian.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if you
I
saw
saw
it.
I saw some of it. Yes, I
Yeah,
didn't get to
neat
finish
guy.
watching.
And he lived through the hyperinflation in Argentina in 1990 and 91. He was a teenager when it occurred.
Oh
And he
yeah.
said, I recall my mom, she'd get paid, she'd rush to the supermarket to buy the food before the prices went up.
Hmm.
And and she said it was really, he said it was really traumatic and dramatic. A lot of people lost a lot of money. It was very painful. And then one day the currency totally failed. It was worthless.
Hmm.
And the Argentinian government came back and said, okay, well, we're going to back the peso using the dollar. Now, dollar's somewhat flawed, but it was a whole lot better than the peso. It wasn't getting printed
Hmm.
in the same way. And he said it was really amazing because within a year or two, things got so much better.
Hmm.
Everything returned to normal. And so we can all look at this and say and decry how bad it is, and it is bad. It's unfair. It's broken. But let's not forget that this is not an unsolvable problem. And if we don't get into some kind of war where we kill a lot of people like the last fourth turning, this is all that's broken here is the money.
Yeah.
And so all we really need to fix is the money. So
Right.
so
And
if we fix the money, things will get better.
right. And I think that that's why it's interesting when you call the book The Big Print. It's also, it feels like we're also living through the big distract, because
Oh yeah.
when you
Yeah.
think about how government prior to 2024, Bitcoin had not been in the stock market. Now there are so many companies that have a stock of Bitcoin, and prior to that it was always not talking about Bitcoin in a positive way in media. And also, it was just trying to distract people from what is really something that is growing and actually could fix problems. So, like, I think that so many Americans are they misunderstand the fact that when they think of Bitcoin, they think of it as FTX and FTX collapse, and they think of that Sam
Exactly.
Bankman-Fried guy.
Exactly.
And I think that that was
Exactly.
pushed into our mind, or not into Americans' minds, to say like, "Oh, don't get that Bitcoin stuff because it's connected to that person who the
Right.
exchange collapsed." And I feel like
Absolutely.
they fed people that so hardcore, that
Yep.
it feels like when you talk to any person who doesn't understand Bitcoin, that's the first thing they think of. And it's like,
Absolutely.
why was that shoved into people's minds so much to get
Yeah,
them
I
to
mean, you could, yeah, from a conspiracy point of view, you could think the powers that be, create almost had to create somebody like a Sam Bankman-Fried. Maybe it's true. I don't know. I think he was just a bad actor and a bad guy. But you raise a really great point, and I mean, you read the book. I hope you agree. I
Mhm,
really try to attack that heavily
mhm.
because I mean, the two. So I've tried to, I've been in Bitcoin since 2013 or 14, and so I try to orange pill, friends, neighbors, anybody, just because I want to see them protect themselves and benefit financially from it. And the two biggest objections are always, and particularly from gold people. Oh, that's all fraud. Look at Sam Bankman-Fried. All these cryptos, you can just print them up. Yeah, Bitcoin's great, but there are a million of them. There's going to be another
Mhm,
one, and they don't understand proof of work or the mining, or they don't understand any of the stuff that makes Bitcoin different and unique. The difficulty adjustment, all that stuff. They don't get that.
mhm,
But so I have to say, look, guys, you got to understand there are all these fake things, and then there's this one real thing,
mhm,
and they're different. And so that's point one. The other objection I countered a lot, and you'll appreciate this, I'm sure, as well, is that that people say, well, yeah, I get it. It's a libertarian dream. It's sound money. The government can't print it. It's like digital gold. there's no way they're going to let that work, Larry. They're going to shut
Mhm.
that down. They're going to tax the hell out of it. They're going to try and go. Well, and then January, last year they approved the ETF, and I have to admit, even I was like, wow, that's really great. I wasn't sure they were going to do it, and they
Mhm.
did it. And then, of course, now this year we've got a new president, new administration that created a strategy. I mean, so thus far in the last year, the government response to Bitcoin has been fantastic. And
Mhm.
now it may not always be this way because if blue team wins some future election, maybe they'll go back the other direction. But the point I'm making is, the objective point that a lot of my friends had, which is the government will never allow it. Well,
Mhm.
that's kind of gone away. I mean, it's the government is allowing it. The government has a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The
And
government has allowed the ETFs. I mean,
I
and
think
you've also seen, and you got to watch the big money. You've also seen the big money make shifts. I mean, to me, it's enormously important that a guy like Larry Fink, who runs BlackRock, who was
yeah.
kind of a fiat lord and a fiat master, who originally was very negative on Bitcoin, shat all over it. Eventually he's a smart man, and so eventually he did the work and he thought it through, and he I think he came to this conclusion. I think he looked at it and said, you know what, this is going to work, and I've got to either decide, am I going to embrace this and try and make money off it and have it be part of my strategy, or am I going to continue to shit on it and not play in that game? And of course, that's what the guy who ran Vanguard did, and he lost his job. And Fink
Yeah.
embraced it. And so I give him a lot of credit that he actually kind of figured it out and went in the right direction.
Well, I
And
think
Vanguard, I
because
mean, and by the way, they're the largest money manager in the world.
yes.
I mean, that's
Yes.
significant.
It
So,
is.
and guys like Ray Dalio, one of the largest hedge funds in the world, he now gets it. I mean,
Yeah.
so we're seeing growing acceptance that this really is digital gold.
And
And
even for me, I got into Bitcoin in 2020, and I feel like they probably followed the same. A lot of people, like, I didn't either hear about it prior to 2020, and then once I did hear about it, I thought it was just like every other crypto, which when you
right,
understand that every other crypto is a technology and Bitcoin is a protocol, you
yeah,
understand that it's different because it's like how the internet is a protocol and the
right.
internet decentralization
Nobody
one.
controls it. It's fair for everybody. There's no
Yeah,
pre-mine. There's no I mean, look, if your cryptocurrency has a CEO, you don't want it.
right.
And there
Yeah,
is
and I
no
think
there is no CEO of Bitcoin.
yes, and it's that's the there's so many reasons. There's a bunch, and that's why it takes some time to learn about it. But it's literally not just a technology; it's so different. And
Yeah.
I think that the people that argue that government will never allow it, there's still people that say that. But if you think about it, if they do say like, okay, we're going to start taxing Bitcoin where other countries are not, then once you see that your wealth and your rises a significant amount, you're just going to say, well, I'll go live in that country instead. I'm just going to get out of
Well,
here.
that's exactly right. So you get game theory on countries, and we're starting to see nation state FOMO, where I'm sure. Look, when the U.S. announced they were going to form a strategic Bitcoin reserve, even though they didn't say they were going to add to the coins they have, every other country in the world had to take note of that and go, huh, what should we do about this? And
Mhm.
so, I mean, it really, we all know this, but maybe some of the people listening don't. I mean, it's such an amazing technological innovation. I mean, it's almost God given. And that we've lived, I mean, humankind has lived for thousands of years. We've never had a money that didn't debase over time. I mean, gold was
Right.
great, but it still got debased. I mean, we mine 1.7% of the existing supply every year. And that, do the math on that, it tells you that in 40 some odd years, the supply will double. And
Hmm.
so even with gold, you had monetary dilution. Here we
Hmm.
actually have a technological thing driven by computers, driven by technology, which is going to save us, that has zero monetary dilution. I think, I don't think, it's like, um, when new inventions come along. I mean, I saw this in myself with the internet, right? When new inventions come along, it's very hard to know how big and important the impact is going to be,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I was an early investor in the internet. I really believed in, and I knew it was going to be important. I mean, I mean, when somebody said to me, you can send email to people anywhere in the world for free, I was just like, wow, that's going to be powerful. And of course, Paul Krugman's reaction was, well, people just don't have that much to say to each other. And I was kind of like, what are you talking about? I mean, if you make it free, they're going to communicate on the internet. But in 2000, I mean, could I foresee Amazon, or could I foresee Google, or could I
Right.
foresee eBay, or I mean, I just couldn't foresee all these use cases. Could I foresee that you and I would be talking halfway across the country, real time with video, and
Mhm.
broadcasting it. No, I couldn't foresee any of those things,
Mhm.
because the technologies didn't exist, and they were in the process of developing. And I think it's important to kind of think of Bitcoin in those terms. I mean,
Right.
it's hard for us to foresee how important this is going to be, but I think you're going to look back and it's going to be like, wow, that was a really important invention.
Yeah,
You know what I
because
mean?
we're living through what before was the industrial revolution. It's like the
Correct.
technology revolution, and
Exactly.
we couldn't imagine what that would do to shape our worlds around us, and we can't imagine exponential growth now that technology
Exactly.
is,
Well,
this
and now, the most recent thing is AI. I mean, look at what that's going to do. I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
I mean, the rate of change, and it's fun when you go back and you look at history. I mean, I talk about in the book, both my grandparents, I mean, they both grew up, they didn't have indoor plumbing when they were born,
Mhm.
and by the end of their lives, I mean, they were flying on jet, and back when they were born, the Wright brothers hadn't flown yet. They were just about to, and by the end of their lives, they were taking, jet trips around the world. I
And
mean, it's just,
I have some ideas about AI and how it's going to shape our world going forward. But what are your thoughts about how some people, they have that same fear that they think, oh, with AI and robots, no one's going to have a job anymore. It's going to destroy everything. But it's
there'll be
like, what are
different
your
jobs.
thoughts?
There'll
Yeah.
be there, yeah. Every single technology has created more jobs. They're just different.
Hmm.
I mean, I mean, the book talks about this. The Luddites were convinced that having weaving machines was going to put all the weavers out of business. So Ned Ludd's followers ran around England smashing the weaving machines. Well,
Hmm.
guess what? When you can weave cloth much more quickly, the people who are weaving the cloth, they have free time to go do something else, and
Hmm.
they'll do something else. So there's always, to be anti-technology, anti-productivity, anti-development
Yeah.
is just very wrong and very backward thinking. I mean,
Yeah. And when you have
we should
a,
embrace it.
yes, when you have a technology that increases labor and productivity, then you have, a deflationary force where instead of
Correct.
inflation, you have prices going down, you
Correct.
have things costing less, and it could give people again that hope because now you're not spending every single hour and have no time for your kids and your family, no time to take care of yourself and your body and have live till you're an older age and feel healthy. You could actually take this extra time that you have now because there is a deflationary force happening in the world.
Correct. That's exactly right. And let's not totally make complete lightness of it. I mean, there is change. I mean, when things get automated, the people who used to do it by hand before, they do lose their jobs. I mean,
Mhm.
the buggy whip manufacturers, all went bankrupt when the automobile came along.
Right.
But that's the process of productivity growth and creative destruction, and that's capitalism by definition. And
Well,
those people who were making buggy whips obviously found jobs doing something that was better, that was more useful.
I
um,
even heard, I don't know what you think about this, because I feel like I had seen, again, back when I got orange pilled, I had seen this documentary called The Social Dilemma, and it was about how, like the most important resource being mined besides Bitcoin is human attention. So it's like this,
yes.
it creates this new creator economy where people can
Yeah.
spend more time being creative and actually doing things that normally they wouldn't have time to do that AI can't do because they need this, humans to kind of have the creativity and the to come up with ideas and that's where AI kind of learns from us, so it's like we would
Yeah.
have
Well,
more time.
what you're touching on is the issue that the only thing scarcer than Bitcoin is human time.
Hmm.
I mean, we all have a fixed life. We all have a fixed lifetime, fixed lifespan, and that's that. And so
Hmm.
that's even scarcer than Bitcoin. And yes, I mean, human attention is ultimately be extremely valuable. It's already valuable. I mean, look at how people online, influencers monetize eyeballs. They,
Hmm.
where people spend their time has value. I mean, it's a lot of these online apps. I mean, we are the product.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And all the ads, it's like every time you do anything you do online, it oh, I think my live stream ended, but let me start recording again. Hold on one second. Because
okay.
it says upload complete, but do you mind if we pause it for a
Not
sec
a
so
bit.
I
I don't
can,
mind. That's fine if you want to pause. That's good.
or maybe let me just double check if it's still playing. Hold on
Yeah,
one
go see.
second. Okay.
Go see. I have not done. I think I did the first live stream I've done was yesterday, and I think this is the second one. So
I think
this
it's
is a new
still I
experience
think
for me
it's
as well.
yeah, it looks like it's still going. So I
Oh,
think we're
good.
good. Yeah.
All right.
So I just wanted to make sure. I don't know why it did that on here,
Yeah.
so I could always download it from YouTube or have some really great clips made from it. But yeah, we were talking about time and human attention, and oh yes, so like all the ads that people receive anytime you go on Google or YouTube or any social media site, you know, there's people make money off of what you do online, and I think eventually with the decentralization that's happening and the shift with AI and the shift with people being a more they own their time, they own their Bitcoin, they own, so I think in the future it'll be more of a world where people get monetized for their attention, and that could be like a way that you get paid because of the things you
Yeah,
do
the
on
whole notion of micropayments is very fascinating to me. That we could all. I mean, once the Lightning Network is fully developed, we could all be. You see something, you like it. I mean, you send a few sats that way. I mean, it's
Mhm.
to me, I think it's a powerful idea that'll probably take hold over the years. But
Yeah.
we're still so early in this whole process,
Mhm.
and it's difficult to see how. I mean, what I described with the internet. Remember, we're 25 years into the internet. I kind of consider real internet adoption to have started at 2000. I mean, it came out in 90. Well, it became more prevalent in 95 when I was investing in it in 93. But in 2000, about half the country had an internet hookup of
Mhm.
some kind. And that was when broadband really started to come in. You didn't have to do that dial-up thing where you had to put a phone in a modem and all that.
Mhm.
And also, that was by that time most people had a graphical user interface, and you had the Netscape browser was available. So we're now 25 years deep in the internet, and I kind of think of Bitcoin, although it's been around for 16 years. I kind of think like the first, I don't know, they don't all count. I mean, you didn't even have a public exchange to trade it on. Well, you had Mt. Gox, which failed, but you didn't, Netscape, or I mean, Coinbase didn't go public until 2013.
Mhm.
So, the first 6 or 7 years, I mean, for a while, it didn't even have any value until the pizza transaction. So we're, if you kind of take away the first 6 or 7 years, what are we now? Maybe 9 years, 8, 9 years deep into
Mhm.
the development of Bitcoin. I mean, we got a long way to go until this thing gets more broadly accepted. I mean, the book has some good charts on that show adoption of other technologies and the curve.
Yeah,
And
I've
I'm
seen
with
that.
Michael Saylor on this. He thinks we're kind of right at the inflection point in the curve where it's going to really accelerate. And I agree with him.
I feel
I mean,
like it too.
it's hard to find somebody now who's not at least aware of Bitcoin. And they
Mhm.
may not have bought it. They may think it's a scam. They may, they have a negative, but you can't. I mean, 5 years ago, I'd say Bitcoin, and people say, "What?"
Yeah.
People didn't even know what it was. So
But now when they do know what it is, they have the wrong idea about it
well,
because they
that's right.
just
But
didn't, yeah,
that's
so
that's why you do what you do. That's
yeah.
why I do what I do. That's why
Mhm.
we're gonna flood the zone, right?
Yeah.
And they're, all-
Yeah,
they're
I mean,
not
it's
they're not gonna, and it's gonna and the price is gonna keep going up. They're not gonna be able to ignore it. I mean, they're just gonna eventually say, "Oh, God damn it!" I mean,
yeah,
I'm even seeing guys that I've seen this progression with everybody, and I mean, Max Kaiser saw it with me. I mean, originally I had a hard time getting off gold to go to Bitcoin,
right.
and Max just kept saying to me, "You'll get there, just keep going, you'll get there," and he was right. you know.
And Max Kaiser, like, knowing that he bought it at what, like a dollar?
Oh, $1, $2. I know. I had
He
lunch
was
with him. I had
convicted.
lunch with him in the Middle East when he was, he wrote the forward of the book, which I'm eternally grateful for. I mean,
Mhm.
he's
Oh,
such a
he
great
wrote it.
guy, and it was a really good forward. And he said to me, he said, "Yeah, I was buying at $2." I'm sitting there thinking to myself, "God damn it, Trace Meyer bought it 50 cents." So
To have that kind of
we all
conviction
feel
too.
like we paid too much, Stacy.
Right. But that's the thing, when everyone feels like they pay too much and anyone listening that doesn't understand, it's like we are like Bitcoin is a finite supply asset. It's like
Right.
it's the only thing in the world that's like this.
We've never had
And
something like this before. That's what's so unique.
yeah.
And that's right. You can't pay too much for it. I
Yeah.
mean, I love the interview that Sailor had with that Laura woman where he's just said it's going up forever, Laura.
I
I just
know. It's
love that because
he's
and most people can't understand that. I mean, TradFi people especially. I have a lot of TradFi friends who even kind of get it and maybe want to own it. But they're having a really hard time. They're like, Larry, you bought it at 10,000. You're asking me to pay 100? I can't do that. And I'm like, okay, but what if I told you in 5 to 7 years it's going to be a million? And you could
yeah.
now buy it at 100. I mean, you can't look
Mhm.
backwards. You got to look forward to where it's going.
Especially when you think about the 1%. I think they're well, right now we're around 98%. I think in the next 10 years we're getting to 99% of the total supply being
Oh yeah, there's
available.
not much more to come. I mean,
And
effectively, I mean, right now that stock to flow is half the rate of gold. We're adding 0.8% per year to the supply, and of course, in the next halving, that'll go to 4, and then point or point 0.4, and then point 0.2. So,
mhm.
Yeah, there's not much new Bitcoin coming into the market, and
Yeah,
so
and it's
that
gonna keep shrinking so infinitely, like so tiny small by the end of it. By the
yeah,
year 2140, it's gonna be down to the last Satoshi, which is one out of 100,000
100
of a
million.
Bitcoin.
Yeah,
100,
yeah.
yeah. So you're gonna be down to the last Satoshi, which I describe it as like the pennies of Bitcoin, for people that just don't know what Satoshis are.
Right, exactly.
But it's gonna come down to that. So the last 1% will take till the year 2140 to finish, and that is
Right.
the total supply. So we are literally at these points where the remaining supply is trickling into the system as the demand is rising.
Correct,
Hmm.
correct. Yeah, and I mean, actually, I should point out too, there are two things that are limited. I mean, and this is important to understand. One is the supply of Bitcoin. The other is block space. I mean, I
Yes.
don't think there's going to be another set of block wars. I don't think we're ever going to go to larger blocks.
Mm-mm.
And so the fact that all of us today can still do on-chain transaction, I mean, we'll tell our grandkids about this because, on-chain transactions will become enormously expensive in the future as the value of the coin gets much, much higher and the subsidy, the block subsidy gets much, much lower. But
Hmm.
we won't need to do on-chain transactions because layer two and whether it's Lightning or some alternative layer will be used for the more common transactions, and the chain itself
Hmm.
will just be used for the super solid store of value, application.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's the great thing when people had this, like the whole block size war thing is crazy because people were afraid that Bitcoin was getting overloaded, and we need to increase these block size, and they lost that war, that happened. But it's like nobody even pictured at that time that things would be built on top of Bitcoin, instead of
correct.
trying to create alternative cryptocurrencies and all these other things. You don't need that as long as you have a layer 2 and a layer 3 and things built on top of it. So it's like that's why lightning is important. And I even heard from Bevan Waite from Jan 3. He was talking about the Aqua wallet, how they have where it could be a larger than, because lightning you could send, smaller amounts like to buy a coffee or buy a sandwich. But you could use this other like layer that Aqua wallet has, that it's a larger amount than lightning, but not like on chain transactions where it would become expensive.
Right. Yeah. No, I know there are solutions emerging. Yeah, because the liquidity in Lightning for some time was relatively modest. When I know I tried to send some multi-thousand-dollar transactions and it didn't really work very well, if at all. So
Mhm.
yeah, look, it's, I mean, and this reminds me of the internet too. I mean, there were a lot of clunky things about the internet in the early days. And, I mean, leave it to technologists to sort this stuff out. There's a
Right.
huge reward for the people who provide the solutions. And
Yeah.
so those solutions are coming. We just, we got to give them time to work through and provide them to us.
Yeah. And I think that the solutions, there's always people building and they're always creating, but it's like Bitcoin is the bedrock, it's the protocol, it's the internet
Exactly.
of a new financial
That's exactly right. It's like
system.
TCP/IP, but for
Hmm.
money. And by the way, money is actually bigger than information. I mean, it touches
Hmm.
almost everything. So yeah,
And
it's
even, oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, that's fine.
Okay, so I even like one other thought I had. I wanted to know what you think about it too, but I felt like AI scares me less because Bitcoin exists. Because people always worry that AI is going to be controlled, and like companies and corporations will control it and have ultimate control over the people. But I feel like that will also win because you know how things are built on top of Bitcoin, like Lightning. I think that AI will have to be incorporated into something like Bitcoin that can't be changed or manipulated or controlled by somebody with the most money, and it will be sort of this layer of truth for AI to not, so that we don't feel like Google has control of
Yeah.
whatever we're told. You know what I mean? I don't know. I
It's a
have that
very
thought.
interesting thought, and I hadn't really thought about that much before, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, I do think that one of the things that's underrated in the whole Bitcoin network is that yes, it's a sound money protocol, and yes, there are a limited supply of them, and the first and best use case is obviously store of value,
Hmm.
but it's also a truth protocol. I mean, this is the
Hmm.
most secure, largest immutable, network in the world by, orders of magnitude. And so if something is encoded in the network, it's true. It's
Hmm.
proven to be true.
Hmm.
And so I think I think many people are maybe underestimating how important that is. I mean, because I mean, how do we really know what objective truth is? I mean, you kind of don't. I mean, we all kind of hone in on it through science, but And in many areas, there is no objective truth because there's a lot of opinion and debate.
Hmm.
But here we have a mathematical truth engine, and so I think I think there'll be very big implications coming out of that as well.
Yeah, it makes me feel like that hope that Bitcoin brings to all different aspects of our life. It just makes me feel less worried about AI. I just feel like
Hmm.
it really does feel that way to me.
Well, and the thing to keep in mind with AI is it's and robots. I mean, they're always programmed by humans and by individuals, and
Hmm.
you know
But you don't want those individuals programming them to say, okay, we're selling this robot and they're all going to be in your home, but it's controlled by some
well, no,
bureaucrat or
yeah, I know,
corporation.
a bad actor. I get it. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
get it.
So it can't
Well,
be like
and I mean,
feeding you,
as Saylor points out, I mean, Bitcoin will become it could kind of become a weapon of war. I mean, in the sense that, again, it's objectively provable in a
Hmm.
world where things won't necessarily be provable. I mean,
Yeah.
we could have AI images of people, we'll have AI voices of people, all this
Hmm.
stuff. But if you can control something that's on a network that can be proven, well,
Hmm.
then you can prove that you are you, so to speak.
Yes.
And it's kind of ethereal to think about it, but I think it's going to matter. I
Hmm.
really think it's going to matter, but we're talking years out. So
And we have these ideas and we have these feelings, but it's true. It's like the way that you can't actually picture how it's going to turn out, but you do have that feeling that you know that it's truth. So you know it's got to be good. You know it's going to
I
reshape
think
and
that's
people will
exactly
go.
right. That's exactly right. And looking backwards, we'll think, oh, we should have seen that. It was obvious. I mean,
Hmm.
like the internet, the first big app of the internet, I thought, so the internet came out and everyone's sending emails. A few people are browsing, they're getting information, so on and so forth. The first big kind of winning app on the internet was eBay. And what was eBay? eBay was just a worldwide swap market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got old junk in your garage, you want to sell it, put it up for sale on eBay.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, it was and it did really well. It was just such an ingenious idea. It was like, yeah, of
Hmm.
course. I can go to my local, garage sale, but I can't do a worldwide garage sale. Well, eBay enabled you to do that.
Right.
And so it's like things like that are going to happen with Bitcoin. They're going to,
Even when you think about how people thought that Netflix wouldn't be a thing in Blockbuster, but it's like we were so stuck in this idea that what we're used to and comfortable with, we couldn't imagine change. So it's like
yeah,
even when people used to have the hobby of buying CDs or buying records, like
correct.
if people still buy records for because it feels like just old school.
Right.
But it's like when you used to go to the store and buy CDs, you felt like, well, what if I don't actually own the CD? What am I buying? Like you think that
Yeah.
you're
Well,
not buying a physical thing.
yeah, no, I
And that's
recall
the
very
same.
clearly going to Blockbuster multiple times to get, the latest release of the hottest series, right?
Mhm.
And then the
You felt
broadband
like
tech.
you actually left the store with something in your hands, like you had
Yes,
this idea that
correct.
it's physical, I have it, I own it. People used to have shelves full of video, like VHSs and,
Oh,
DVDs and
absolutely. I've still got a
Blu-rays.
very big CD. I love music, and so I've
Yeah.
got an enormous CD collection. It's just sitting there collecting dust.
Yeah, and
Apple
now you
Music
have
has everything I
streaming.
need.
Right. You've got Spotify where you can have every song ever created,
Exactly.
in your
I don't
phone,
need it anymore. But
But people
yeah,
couldn't think of that, and I think that's when you think about Bitcoin, you think, "Well, I'm not holding dollars in my hand. What's Bitcoin?" It's like, well, it's the same idea as you watching a movie. You're still using it, you're still watching it,
yes,
you're benefiting. You're just
yes,
not actually, holding it in your hands, and what's credit then in that case? Credit is just not a different protocol. It's not something you're holding hold your credit card, but
exactly.
Mhm,
Exactly. Well, and you get into, like I say, when you get into these micro transactions,
mhm,
you could, in theory, we could all monetize ourselves, and there'll be a way, I think, eventually it'll get, the payment mechanisms will get easy enough and low enough cost that, like right now, if I want to read, if I want to read a Wall Street Journal article, I've got to subscribe to Wall Street Journal and pay them $40 a month, whatever it
mhm,
is. There should be a super easy swap mechanism where I can say, well, if I want to read that article and that article is 62 cents and all I got to do is send a lightning transaction, fine, I'll
mhm.
pay 60. I don't want to pay the $40 a month, but I'll pay the
Yeah,
62 cents.
for that article,
Or
yes, yeah.
yeah, or the same is true like Major League Baseball. If I want to get Major League Baseball, on my home cable package, I got to pay a couple $100 a year.
My husband
Well,
is so upset about that too.
yeah, right. Or football. Yeah, I mean, same deal. It's like, no, I don't really care about that, but damn it, I want to watch the Lions game, and I'd be happy to pay $7 for the Lions game, but they don't sell it that way. And
Right.
it's just because they haven't set up how they can't figure out how to collectively, you know, sell it for a reasonable price and not have the
Mhm.
fees and charge. And it doesn't work yet. But I mean, in turn, I mean, probably, I mean, podcasts like this might get monetized where, I mean, would somebody pay a couple of cents to see a podcast? Probably they would, and so
Hmm.
you'd make a little money, I'd make a little money, whatever it would be. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think that,
You
and
just
in turn, there'd be really cool kind of crowdfunding aspects, and I mean, imagine a society where, let's say somebody does something really good,
hmm
somebody commits an incredibly heroic act, right, and
hmm
everybody sees it and hears about it, and then the story is told that person's very poor. Well, wouldn't imagine, there are 330 million people in this country. Well, what if everybody sent them a dime? Do you know what I mean? I mean, that
Yeah.
adds up to that, and that were easy to do. You were on Nostra and you just saw me and said, "Gosh, I really approve of that kind of behavior. I'm going to send that guy a dime."
And that
Well,
is definitely a
right?
possible future that you could imagine, because young people today, I feel like they, they're on social media a lot. They see YouTube a lot. They see all these TikToks, but I feel like they appreciate truth and genuine humans.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. So I've got 3 20-year-olds. I'll just comment on that. I mean,
Hmm.
the beautiful thing about this generation is that, unlike the baby boomer generation, my generation, we kind of got out, and the whole thing was we were kind of programmed to, like, be high achievers and make money so you can buy a nice car. You know what I mean? And buy a nice house and live a good
Yeah.
lifestyle. That was
Hmm.
that was kind of the message from our parents. All right, so we followed the script, right?
Hmm.
Well, my kids, and it's beautiful the way it's happened. I mean, um, they have a much broader view of the world, and they're kind of like, that's, they don't want necessarily stuff, they don't necessarily want houses, they want cars. They're kind of like, Dad, I just want to live in a world that's a good world. I want to see a world that's fair. I want to, they're concerned about everybody's well-being. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? And that's,
because it's more connection.
yeah, because they're more connected, right? Because of all these social networks. And so for them, it's just, I mean, I love, I mean, your generation is going to be the hero generation that's going to save us from this monetary crisis, that's going to rebuild a society that's fairer. And, I think that group of people are, your group, your age group is going to be much more magnanimous about trying to make sure everybody's doing well, not just the people at the top.
Hmm.
And that's really what the world needs. It's a beautiful thing. So,
And that's what I think when I think about Bitcoin. I feel like even though people talk about the supply dwindling and it being a finite supply, there will always be redistribution of wealth in this system. So
oh,
it's like there's
absolutely,
always going to be somebody selling at some
absolutely.
sort of price
No,
because they.
Bitcoin's just a giant savings pool. That's all it
Mhm,
is. And so you either decide, all right, I've got
mhm,
excess capital and I want to save, knowing that it'll be worth more in the future, I'll buy
mhm,
Bitcoin. Or, at some point I'm going to retire and maybe not have any kind of regular income, but I'll
mhm.
need to support my lifestyle. And so I'll slowly sell Bitcoin to
Yeah, just live
pay my
off of it.
bills. Yeah, I'll
Mhm,
just live off of it. But
mhm.
what's beautiful about it is knowing that whatever the stack I have is, I know that it's going to continue to appreciate in value, not depreciate in value. I mean,
Exactly.
the saddest thing that my generation has faced, and I saw this a lot, I still see it today, I saw it with my dad, is you work hard all your life and you save up a certain amount of money, and that's your entire life effort. You don't get to do it over again. I mean, you're 60 or 70, you don't have the energy you had when you were 20 or 30, right?
Yep.
And you retire or you decide to slow down, and suddenly the money just doesn't buy as much. And my father, retired with an okay sum of money. He should have been pretty comfortable for the rest of. By the time he passed, it had really dwindled down to a much more modest amount because of all the inflation that takes place. I
Mhm.
see 60 and 70-year-olds who are afraid to retire, even though they have their house paid off and a decent, what most people would say,
Yeah.
well, they're fairly well off. And they're like, well, maybe I'm not, because if I live to be 90 and inflation is really high, I'm going to run out of money,
Yep.
and that's to me, that's really tragic. I mean, I
And why
think,
should you be working till you're 70 and literally still feel like you can't retire yet and can't take care of yourself the way you should? And it's like
right.
you're working till you pretty much you feel like you're like working yourself to death, you know?
That's kind of what it is. And it's really kind of sad because, I mean, I pointed out earlier, I mean, when COVID came along, they grew the money supply 40% in 2 years, right?
Hmm.
And so we more or less, COVID created about 40% inflation in the price of everything. I think that's what most people would agree. Their groceries have gone up by that amount. And, so and I know people like this. They've worked their whole life. They've saved. They've done the right thing, which is to save. Of course, I mean, in America, people don't think that's the right thing, but historically, it always has been the right thing. They built up a stack of money, whether it's 50 grand or a million if they did well, but it's some amount of money, and that represents their entire life's effort. And then the
Hmm.
government comes along, prints 40% of the money supply. They just stole 40% of that buying power. They just stole it.
People don't understand that. I think people just don't understand that when they do that, it's when you think of supply and demand, when there's more dollars circulating, it takes more of those dollars to buy
Yeah.
stuff.
No, you're right. That's why people do not understand it. And again, therefore the book and therefore I mean, this is what we're all fighting for. We're all fighting
Mhm,
to end this.
mhm.
We're fighting for a system that's fair, that ends this, so that, people can save money, do the right thing, save money, knowing that it will benefit them in the longer run and their life will get better.
Plus, we
And
want also to make sure that when we do these things, when you write your book and when I'm doing what I'm doing, it's you want to make sure that because we know we're at this inflection point, this point that we feel like with technology, Bitcoin is growing faster than the internet. So I've heard that Bitcoin is like 1994 of the internet right now. That's how
right,
what stage we're at, but it's growing faster. And the reason we want to spread the word and let people know is because we see what's going on and it's very important that you wrote this book and that people understand the history and the hope, but just to see that we would like for more people that we care about and anybody who feels like they have been tired from working to death. It's like you can slowly put, I like the calculation, as much as you understand about Bitcoin, that's how much you should put into Bitcoin. Just if you don't understand much, put a little bit. If you understand a lot, put more. But I love that. And I think that we would love to see people get into it before the governments and the corporations and all of them collect most of the
absolutely,
supply. And then you're
absolutely.
buying it very expensive. So it's like, at least if you buy it now before they're all collecting it, it'll be beneficial for you. You always feel like you're buying it at a high price, but it's,
This is one of those games where the early worm, I mean, the early bird gets the worm. I mean, it
mhm,
really, I mean, I mean, Max Kaiser got a better worm than I got, and but people who wait 10 years, they're going to pay more, and the benefits will always be there because it is going up forever. So it will
mhm,
always be the superior form of savings, and so savings are a good thing. But
mhm,
yes, obviously, the sooner you join the network, the sooner you begin to enjoy the benefits. And that's one of the other things I try to convey to non-coiners is just how kind of peaceful it feels once you get to where you are, where I am, where you just totally get it and
mhm,
you're all in, more or less.
mhm,
You just it provides a sense of peace, that in
mhm,
your mentally. I mean, I don't think most people fully understand how stressful and mentally taxing the rat race is. I mean,
mhm,
and when you're scrambling to always pay the bills and you got to work more hours, more jobs, I mean, you feel like you'll never get ahead. I mean, this is why people play the lottery, because it's the only
mhm.
thing that gives them hope. They
Right.
know it's a bad bet. Nobody, I mean, statistically, the lottery makes no sense. You're throwing the money away, but people do it because it's the only hope they have in their life. And instead, if they take that $10, if they're using, or 20 or whatever it is they use to play the lottery, instead if they put it into Bitcoin, they would, and watched it grow over time, they would be kind of, I think, pleasantly surprised with how much further
Mhm.
ahead they'd get.
Because people don't realize that you can save money these days,
Yeah.
and I think you've forgotten that that is not something that
Well,
you.
and they don't, the other thing people don't realize, very few people have an understanding of mathematical compounding. I mean,
Mhm,
when I took my kids when they were much younger and I got out a finance calculator and I showed them, I said, look, if you save it, $100 today and
mhm,
you grow it at 10% a year, and you live to be 60 years old, it's going to be a big number.
mhm,
The compounding savings compounded, it's almost impossible not to get fairly well off if you do it.
mhm,
Assuming that you get the 10%, assuming you don't do stupid investments and lose the money.
mhm,
But it really is the way that, if you look at, kind of The Millionaire Next Door, which is a good book, you look at the way most of these people did it. They did it by savings and just investing in, prudently. And
yeah.
over time, the value grew.
I have my cousin who, I thought this was crazy. She told me about how somebody had given her a $50 savings bond, like a treasury
Yep.
bond, when she was born, so in
Yep.
1986. And do you know how much that treasury bond was worth today?
Well,
$54.
right.
She
And
made $4, so technically she lost money with all this
I was
inflation.
going to say, think about $50 when she was given that back in '84. That
Mhm.
would have bought her a lot more than the $54 buys you today. I mean, $54 today doesn't buy you much at all. So
Yeah, like a tank of gas or something. So
yeah,
it's like
that's a
maybe.
small trip to the grocery store. In fact, we all have different kind of grocery store trips. I mean, you used to have kind of the 20, $30 one. That's now become 60 or 70.
Yeah, yeah, just to get a
And
couple
the
things.
big shop is, 250 to 400, right? Or
Yes,
300 at least
right.
if you want to buy a lot of protein. So,
Yeah, it's
uh,
crazy. So it's like just to think that her like thinking that treasury bonds, and that's what I think the rest of the world realizes too. Like our the US treasuries are not a good store of value. Like they're not gonna
no,
make money holding these
no,
things,
no,
so nobody wants it.
no.
So I don't know. This has been super great.
Well, go ahead.
If you want to finish out with anything else, I feel like we could
No,
talk
nothing in
forever.
particular. I mean, obviously, I'm trying to sell books, but not because I make much money on each book. It's kind of ridiculous how much Amazon takes, but more because I'm really trying to spread the word. I mean,
Hmm.
everyone has to have kind of a, a razor or a core reason for, for doing what they do. And my core reason for writing this book was I really wanted to try and make a statement, help as many people as I could, spread the word as much as I could, and leave an impact,
Hmm.
hopefully of shoving us in a direction toward sound money, because I think it'll make the world a better place. So,
Hmm.
the book, if you can just, pass it on to friends, tell people to buy it, whatever. I mean, I think, when you read it, when people read it, they get it. I mean, I've been told that it's working. So,
Yeah.
if that's the case, the people who control the system, the monetary masters at the Fed, I mean, there are 12 that, on the Fed board, and more that support them, but, and the bankers and all. I mean, we outnumber them enormously, and so we need to get a large group of citizens that really understand this issue and that are pounding the table, saying we've got to go to a sound money system based on Bitcoin, and then it will happen. And as it happens, the world will become a much better place. But we've got to have politicians who run on this issue.
Hmm.
Let's say, hey, sound money is a key part of what I believe in, because as the crisis or the problem unfolds here, they're going to be competing sides. Some people are going to say, no, that sound money stuff, that's bad. That's what's causing the problem. We got to tax it, blah blah blah. But there'll be others who say, no, no, this is what we need to do to fix the broken system. And we
Hmm.
need more of those people. And to get those people, everyone needs to understand it at a core level. And so the book was my attempt to help people to understand it at a core level. So,
Hmm.
I really hope I'm going to measure the success of this book not by how much Bitcoiners like it, because Bitcoiners like it. I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir, right? What what I care about is, how much normie spread can we get? Can we get it to go
Right.
viral? Can we get somebody outside of the Bitcoin world to endorse it?
Right.
Can we get it to the point where it's on, it's just more nationally known? And we got 330 million people in this country.
Right.
I've sold, 15,000 copies or something. That's great. It's going well.
Hmm.
But, Sahil, I mean, not Sahil Bloom, a guy wrote a book called The Psychology of Money,
Hmm.
Morgan Housel. The guy
Hmm.
sold 7 million copies of that book. It's like, okay, come on, guys. How do we get this word out there to everybody? That's,
Right.
I'm all ears. And if anybody is in the media or has any ideas for
Hmm.
how to, get media appearances or push this, I mean, I've sent it to 60 Minutes. I've sent it everywhere, and I'm going to continue sending it everywhere in the hope that people that have media channels will read it, understand it, and say this is something people should be aware of.
Yeah.
So, I'm all ears if anyone wants to DM me on Twitter about suggestions to spread the word. That's what I'm trying to do.
I have some thoughts circling around in my head. So if I can
Okay. Like I say, I'm all
get
ears.
back to you.
We gotta
Yes.
get it to be as broad. We gotta get the knowledge to be as broad as possible if we want to if we want to manifest this new, better world based on sound money, which I think it's going to come either way. Okay.
Right.
I mean, even if I hadn't done this book, it would happen. But
Hmm.
my view is I'm running out of time, so I want to do it sooner rather than later.
You want to see it. You want to see it. You
I
want to
want to
see
see
that
it while I'm
world.
still here to see it. Yeah.
You
So
want to see the world that you're helping build.
that's,
And
yeah, I want to see the improvements happen. I want my kids to live in a better world. I mean,
right.
they're all doing fine, but they can't buy a house. I mean,
Hmm.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you want to spread the word, and you want people who don't understand Bitcoin to understand that the system is rigged against us.
yes,
And, there is an
this is our
answer.
best way to fight back.
Hmm.
You can protect yourself, fight back, and help bring about a better system. So
Yes.
that's all good. But
Thank
anyway,
you.
Stacey, I've really enjoyed being with you. Obviously, you really get
Thank
it,
you.
and I'm happy to do this again in the future. I do
Thank
have
you
to
so
hop
much.
off because I got another one come up here in a few minutes. I got to get ready
Awesome.
for it. But
Thank you so much. I really
oh, you're
appreciate
most
your
welcome.
time. I'm happy to share this. I'm going to let you know if I have any other ideas, and everyone do
Yeah,
the same. Let's share this
I'm
book.
all ears. So thanks again, Stacey. Really appreciate the
Thank
platform.
you.
Take care. We'll see
Thanks a
you.
lot. Take care.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye. I'm still uploading, Stacey. I'm still uploading. I'll leave that open.